Sister Jing knew her divination had come true with absolute certainty. She pouted slightly and shot a smug glance at the few staff officers who had teased her last time. The grown men awkwardly chuckled in response, and Yoon asked, "Is it David Group handling the construction?" "Yes, it's David Group." And Yoon hadn't even warmed her seat after returning. She picked up her teacup and drained it in one gulp, then turned to Zhang Jiwen. "What's your plan?" Zhang Jiwen's face was grim as he replied, "That's exactly the problem. We need concrete evidence proving Maslama is there before we can alert Interpol and coordinate with Malaysian authorities. But judging from Master An's situation on the boat earlier, the enemy already knows they've been discovered. They might act immediately. By the time our agents gather intel, take photos, submit reports, and draft an arrest operation, it'll be too late. We'd like to send agents directly for a search, but we're afraid of triggering a firefight and causing an international incident. Without solid proof, cross-border operations would be seen as violating national sovereignty. Could Sister Jing possibly cast another reading? At the very least, we need to know how much time we have left." And Yun raised her hand and said, "Sister Jing's reading revealed a Liuchong hexagram. Things will only accelerate, not delay. There's no need to calculate again. Let me make a call first." She dialed An Liang. His reply stunned everyone in the room. It turned out An Liang had also been urgently trying to reach her at that very moment. In New York, both Daniel's and Elena's phones had suddenly gone dead, meaning they'd already entered combat readiness. The cat had indeed moved up their timeline. The entire conference room instantly crackled with tension. Some staff officers couldn't sit still anymore and stood up. And Yun rose as well and declared, "There's no time left for slow evidence gathering. Economies can recover, but David Group has a prior record of using earthquake machines, and for them, speed is everything. Just half a month ago, a massive earthquake struck Sichuan, China. The seismic zones of Singapore and China are linked. If an earthquake hits here now, the world will assume it's another movement of the Indian tectonic plate. This isn't just natural disaster, it's Shachi surging through the dragon vein. Beyond casualties, it'll shatter the nation's dragon chi, equivalent to a military invasion. From that point on, ethnic Chinese in Southeast Asia will lose all sovereignty. I propose immediate action. Send plainclothes agents armed only with pistols into Malaysia. If we're wrong, we hold back. But if we spot anything, preemptive control of their operation is paramount. Meanwhile, deploy fully armed counterterrorism units on standby across the strait, ready to blockade sea routes and provide aerial suppression. If our agents engage inside the tunnel, they get immediate backup. Mr. Zhang, contact Malaysian authorities and Interpol for coordination. Even if it means acting first and reporting later, we have to take this gamble." Sister Jing pulled out 2 Beretta pistols from her coat and asked, "I'm going too. Do you have suppressors for these?" After meeting Davis, An Liang hadn't stopped moving. Lu Zhongtong had connected him with the cleaning company contracted for Metropolitan Bank Tower. The owner, a core Hongmen member, fully supported the mission upon learning the details and immediately forged employee badges for Lu Zhongtong and An Liang. With those badges, they could freely enter any office in the building. Li Shoshan grew increasingly exhausted. During the planning session, An Liang let her sleep beside him. By the time all arrangements were finalized, it was already midnight. After settling Li Shoshan to rest, An Liang wanted to check on Daniel's progress with the fund, but found his phone switched off. Daniel, a habitual nightclub reveler, never slept before dawn and never turned off his phone. A sudden chill ran down An Liang's spine. He tried calling Elena next, also unreachable. Since Elena and Daniel were cut from the same cloth, a nighttime blackout meant something was seriously wrong. After contacting An Yoon and realizing the gravity of the situation, An Liang immediately issued emergency orders to his Hongmen brothers. He wanted to command on site but worried about leaving Li Xiaoshan alone. After much deliberation, he dressed her, carried her to the car, and sped back toward Wall Street under cover of night. When he reached the East River waterfront near Wall Street, he looked up at 120 Wall Street and Metropolitan Bank Tower, both lit up brightly on the 23rd floor. Glancing around, he spotted 2 cleaning company vans parked right in front of Metropolitan Bank Tower. Though the building faced southeast toward the East River, its main entrance was actually on the northern corner facing Wall Street. An Liang drove closer and peered through the window. The cleaning company boss sat inside, keeping watch. He gestured for An Liang to move to the riverside front of the tower. An Liang drove over and saw a black van parked by the curb. Its rear doors were slightly ajar and like a mouse stealthily slurping noodles in the dark. It was reeling thick bundles of cables from an open manhole into the cargo bay. Liu Zhongtang poked his head out of the van, glanced furtively at An Liang, and they exchanged knowing smiles. Once the van finished loading and pulled away, An Liang followed. They looped through lower Manhattan several times before returning to the rear garage of the Chinese school in Chinatown. An Liang walked up to the van and remarked, "What cheap paint did you use? The smell's so strong." Liu Zhongtang pressed a lever under the steering wheel. With a click, the license plates changed instantly. Whoa, no screws needed for plate swaps. Italian mafia car tech rivals Italian supercars. Though repainting yourself is still a hassle, if it could auto-change color, that'd be something. Liu Zhongtang laughed, spraying water from a hose onto the vehicle. The black coating turned out to be nothing but school-grade poster paint, washing off instantly to reveal a cheerful multicolored ice cream truck underneath. As he rinsed the van, he said, "You don't deal much with the mafia. Chicago gangsters were doing these plate switch tricks decades ago. Auto color change? Too sci-fi. Even if possible, I'd worry about pressing the wrong button. Imagine turning colors at a busy intersection in broad daylight. Good luck explaining that to cops. What'd you haul back? And Liang hopped into the cargo bay and rummaged through the load, cables, fiber optics, and plenty of unidentifiable junk. Liu Zhongtang stared at the pile, just as baffled as Liang. They shoved the clutter of scrap metal out of the van, and Liu Zhongtang said, "Who knows what it is? Anyway, we severed and took every line running from the tower's front entrance to the East River. Tomorrow, the city crew can dig it all up for construction." This tactic was Liu Zhongtang's original idea. In 2008, the Grand Duke Jupiter, Tai Sui position lay due north, and Metropolitan Bank Tower's main entrance happened to face exactly that direction. In Feng Shui terms, this created a direct clash with Tai Sui. Tai Sui represents the most destructive directional force. Disturbing Earth in this sector triggers disasters with terrifying speed and intensity. Yet that year, Wall Street's annual prosperity star had flown precisely to Metropolitan Bank Tower and 120 Wall Street. Without deliberately provoking Tai Sui's malevolent energy, the entire district might have peacefully weathered the year. To generate negative chi from the Grand Duke Jupiter and create a gap in the fortune of the two towers at the East River mouth, the first step was nothing less than disturbing the Earth right under the Grand Duke Jupiter's head, and the best way to get construction work started in front of those towers? Get the city government to do it. Under cover of parked cars, sanitation workers slipped into the sewers, cut all the cables so Liu Zhongtang could pull them out from the other end, and sawed through water and steam pipes. Now underground leaks were slowly spreading. By morning, the area in front of the towers would be a bubbling pond, drawing municipal repair crews from every direction to dig and fuss over the mess, and Liang tucked the blanket more securely around Li Shaoxian in the jeep. She was sleeping soundly, her breathing calm and even like a baby nestled in her mother's arms. He didn't want to wake her. Dawn would bring a brutal fight, and he himself couldn't sleep anyway, so he sat with Liu Zhongtang in the garage chatting idly. Liu Zhongtang understood every feng shui move Liang had made, but he was puzzled about one thing. Why invite Davis to join the fight? He poured a cup of strong tea from the big pot he'd rushed out of his school office with and handed it to Liang. "Davis and the cat are cut from the same cloth," Liu said. "If you ask for his help, I'm afraid it'll backfire. If he turns on us, we're finished." Liang sat on a bench outside the car, gently blowing on his hot tea. Monthly is also a hedge fund, but they're not as ruthless as the cat. Davis is a man of his word. He never signs contracts when doing business. That's not because he's naive. It's because he doesn't need legal protection. He's like a dog that's won 100 fights. No other dog in the city dares challenge him. All he has to do is look at a pup, and it rolls over, belly up, saying, "Fine, go ahead and bite me." And Liang mimicked the pose, making Liu Zhongtang laugh. But Liu still had concerns. "You also promised Davis a huge profit after this is over. With the subprime mortgage crisis this bad, aren't you just making things worse? Feels like aiding the enemy." "It's complicated," and Liang said, setting down his cup and keeping his eyes on the jeep. "If Dada were here, he'd explain it better. But I have my own thoughts. The subprime mortgage crisis isn't something one or two people, or even a couple of conglomerates can fix. Dada and I suspect it's a globally coordinated strike, orchestrated from behind the scenes. And it's not just financial groups pulling the strings without politicians involved. The damage wouldn't be this massive. This crisis is really a grand reshuffling of wealth. The most immediate result, a wave of predatory mergers in the domestic financial sector. What I'm doing aligns with the tide of history. Mergers will happen regardless. The only question is, who gets to win? Besides, this year's astrological chart is terrible for finance. You can calculate that yourself? Whether it's conspiracy or economic law, to a metaphysician, it all feels inevitable. The cat has been systematically targeting emerging nations from the start," he continued. "They used to lock down dragon veins, pressure governments into long-term debt, and wage economic warfare through subtle means, what you'd call civilized combat. But ever since they tested that earthquake machine, their methods changed. Now they're willing to trigger natural disasters just to grab profits faster. That's crossing a line the heavens won't allow." "Your target is only the cat," Liu said. "Exactly. We now know the cat has two members, United Americas and Metropolitan Bank Tower. Metropolitan Bank is one of America's top 10 banks. It's not like Wise Bank, which we could topple outright. My goal is to at least drive United Americas back to the Virgin Islands and inflict serious losses on Metropolitan Bank to teach them a lesson. It's only May 2008, and the subprime mortgage crisis will keep worsening. Asia will eventually be hit. For Singapore to weather this storm, we need all hands on deck. In ancient terms, good feng shui without a wise ruler is truly aiding tyrants. But we absolutely cannot let heartless animals like Medvey succeed. My sister and Yun and I agree. Preventing man-made disasters comes first. Everything else is just about maximizing our gains." Liu Zhongtang thought it over, but still didn't fully grasp the strategy. "If your target is United Americas, why did you send Davis to short Metropolitan Bank's stock?" "That's military strategy," and Liang explained. "Commercial banks can't directly shake the market, only hedge funds can stir things up. Singapore's sovereign wealth fund already has defensive plans. They'll drain Dada's capital on the front lines. Our job in the rear is to burn his supply lines. When Metropolitan Bank's stock crashes, its assets take a direct hit. Once asset values drop, they can't borrow externally. If Dada can't access dollars, he loses his follow-up firepower." They talked deep into the night until dawn began to break. When Li Shaoxian woke up groggy, She found herself wrapped in the blanket she'd brought from home, and Liang was dozing beside her, still gently holding her hand. That same night, Elena and Daniel also stayed awake. For secrecy, Matvey had minimized all communications. After finalizing the new plan with United Americas, he severed all contact and switched operations to automatic mode. Elena should have accompanied Matvey to Singapore for the field operation. This was the cat's most aggressive strike yet, but she had successfully seized control of David Group using Kabbalistic rituals, completing the encirclement of Wall Street. She now had to remain at 120 Wall Street, forming a pincer movement with Daniel. Daniel, however, knew nothing of these esoteric maneuvers. On the 23rd floor of Metropolitan Bank Tower, he and a team of senior traders monitored Southeast Asian economic data, running computer models to simulate and predict the most likely scenarios. His greatest joy was finally meeting the boss who'd hired him, a burly white man named Brown, with whom he instantly clicked. Brown wasn't tainted by Wall Street's usual racial prejudices. Like Daniel, he loved meat, came from a trading background, and most impressively still swore like a sailor, his profanities blasting opponents like rocket fire. Soon after meeting, Brown invited Daniel to take a technical stake in the Butterfly Fund. Daniel loved the name. The butterfly effect in finance was far more tangible than in meteorology. No one could prove that a butterfly flapping its wings in South America caused a hurricane in the Indian Ocean, but everyone knew that a toxic bond amplified by leverage could genuinely trigger a financial storm. Enamored with it all, Daniel naturally joined the Butterfly Fund as a partner. Just 6 months ago, he'd been a parolee eating potato pancakes in Harlem. Now he stood on Wall Street looking down on the world, holding Singapore's fate in his hands. The transformation made him marvel at the power of Feng Shui and feel grateful for Enlang's loyalty. Only the memory of that $2.5 million check still stung a little. The short-selling attack, originally scheduled to launch in a week, was suddenly moved up by Brown to tomorrow evening. Daniel scrambled to organize his traders for overtime work to redistribute the funds. He directed 10 obscure hedge funds to operate simultaneously, aiming to create an overwhelming sense of doomsday at market open. These funds were seasoned in financial destruction and immediately grasped Daniel's plan. Aside from shouting orders across the office and supervising the traders, everything seemed under control, except for one nagging issue. Daniel had no idea what coordinated event Brown was referring to. Based on his Wall Street experience, such coordination usually meant spreading rumors or inciting panic. The most satisfying scenario he could imagine was something like Liang's stunt, whipping depositors into long lines on the street to trigger a bank run. Just yesterday, he'd even considered inviting Brown to a club for some exotic dancing and a couple of fine drinks, hoping to loosen his tongue. But today, Brown vanished without a trace, leaving Daniel deeply unsettled. This time, Daniel's capital was exceptionally abundant. As a leveraged hedge fund, he had more than enough firepower to buy all of Singapore at rock-bottom prices. Combined with complex reverse options hedging, he was virtually guaranteed to come out unscathed. Once all positions were set, Daniel decided to head home and unwind with his girlfriend. He'd return to Butterfly Fund in the afternoon to begin the most crucial battle of his life. Meanwhile, Yoon and her search team, disguised as civilians, had entered Malaysia. It was already midday. The surrounding fields were empty save for a bird or two flitting across the sky. 5 nondescript sedans crept slowly toward the strait's shoreline, and Yoon ordered the other vehicles to hold position on the perimeter while she drove alone toward the tunnel entrance. She spotted a rural dirt path leading straight to a small grove by the strait. The ground was covered in dry, sandy soil, but there was no sign of any tunnel entrance. For a massive infrastructure project like an undersea tunnel, the entrance should have been vast, easily the size of a football field with multiple access points. The current absence of any visible structure could only mean one thing. The site had been deliberately concealed. Her Lupin compass was reacting intensely, and the Geiger counter confirmed radiation levels had peaked. With more time, this data alone would be enough to demand an international investigation into Malaysia. But the Malaysian government was famously slow-moving. Getting anything done would likely take until next month. Back at the convoy, Yoon conferred with the search team leader. Without a major provocation, the enemy wouldn't reveal themselves or the entrance. Moreover, Matvey surely knew they were overhead now and wouldn't dare make a move, not even activating the machine or emerging from underground. The team leader had suggested conducting a full-scale grid search to locate the entrance and storm it directly, but Yoon opposed to the idea. Even if they found it, the enemy would simply seal it shut. Using explosives or tear gas might not work, and worst of all, it could draw the border patrol. Given the already tense relations between the two countries, the entire team could easily be detained. After a fruitless discussion, Sister Jing grew impatient. She turned to Yoon and said, "This won't work. That won't work. I'll just cast a divination to see when they'll come out. If they emerge today, we'll lie in wait. If they stay put all night, we'll just burn the whole place down." Everyone stared in shock at this violent little nun. Sister Jing rolled her eyes and added, "Or we could just bring in some digging machine." And Yoon chuckled. "We can't dig. The moment we start, Matvey might activate the machine, but your divination sounds good, Sister Jing. If someone comes out, we can capture them alive and slip inside. We shouldn't push these terrorists too far. Go ahead, cast another reading." Sister Jing closed her eyes for a few seconds, then spoke. "There are people hiding in the bushes east of the tunnel right now. At 7 p.m., someone will come out for a shift change. That's when they go back for dinner. Why don't we catch them now? If we approach from the southeast, we'll run right into him." The team leader gaped. "Huh? That's divination? Don't you need turtle shells?" coins or yarrow stalks for that. Sister Jing turned to him with a chirp. This is Xinyi, also called plum blossom numerology. It's perfect for quick, on-the-spot readings. The coin and shell method is Wen Wanggua, used only for major precise calculations. Still confused, the leader eyed her up and down. Dressed in a modest Muslim woman's long robe and headscarf, she looked like a teenage bride, hardly the image of the elite metaphysical expert his boss had supposedly hired. What did you even calculate? I didn't see you do anything. You just suddenly started talking. Sister Jing shot in Yun a wounded look. Do we call the shots or does he? If he's not going to cooperate, I won't help at all. And Yun sighed and patted her hand gently. The captain's just curious how you figured it out. You should explain. It'll help him work with you better next time. Honestly, I'd love to hear it too. Pacified, Sister Jing took a breath and patiently explained. We're sitting still in the car, engine running. That creates a hidden movement in the hexagram, proof that living people are hiding near the tunnel entrance. The car is metal, so it belongs to the Qian trigram. Since we're sitting on it, Qian becomes the lower trigram, which corresponds to the time between 7 and 9 p.m. There are 5 of us in the car. 5 corresponds to the Xun trigram, which points to the southeast and also signifies emerging. So someone will come out from the southeast. Got it. The team listened wide-eyed, no longer daring to question her. The leader nodded crisply, crystal clear. In that case, we'll move into position now. Anyone who enters, we capture, and then infiltrate. Sister Jing slumped deeper into her seat. I already said no one's coming out now. If you want to go, go ahead, but I'm not crawling on the ground to bake in the sun like dried meat. I'll head over at 6:30 p.m. Right now, I'm taking a nap. And Yun gave the team leader an apologetic smile. Sister Jing's readings are always accurate, you can rely on them, and honestly these robes aren't exactly stealth gear. We'll stay here to watch the cars and meet you at 6:30. Thanks for your patience. On Nassau Street in front of Chase Manhattan Plaza, and Liang was busy directing a crane. Wall Street was New York's financial lifeline, but Nassau Street siphoned off its wealth and fortune from the side. Today, Liang intended to make that theft even more complete. As the saying went, money makes the ghost push the millstone. Overnight, the 7 massive stones he'd arranged for Davis had arrived at the base of Chase Manhattan Plaza. Wall Street was prime real estate, every skyscraper built to the very edge of its plot. Developers always tried to build as high as possible to maximize floor area and profits. Standing on the street and looking up, the sky appeared either as a narrow slit or a long cross. Except for the brief half hour when sunlight struck the middle of the road directly, most corners could be described as never seeing the sun all year round, simply because there were too many buildings, too tall, and too densely packed. In front of Chase Manhattan Plaza, facing toward Wall Street, there was an elevated stone platform about the size of an ice rink, an extravagant waste of space, and also a bold statement from the Chase Bank Group to the entire Wall Street. I'm rich. I can afford it. At the center of this open space was a circular opening over 30 meters in diameter, surrounded by stainless steel railings. Looking down through the opening, one could see a shallow circular pool about 1 story below ground level. Originally 5 stones, each larger than a dining table, had been placed in the pool according to the 5 elements arrangement. Liang had measured out the divination lines and precise placement points in the pool early that morning. Now he leaned against the railing, aiming a laser pointer to cast a red dot onto the bottom of the pool, the exact spot determined by his Lupin compass to alter the Feng Shui layout. A crane then lowered a chair-sized piece of basalt precisely onto the marked location. Li Xiaoxin stood quietly beside Liang, arms wrapped around his, listening patiently as he rambled on. Holding a coffee cup, and Liang said, right in front of Chase Bank's headquarters lies a Mingtang, an open ceremonial courtyard. Beneath it sits a heavenly heart wealth pool, and inside that pool is a 5 elements formation. And this formation was set up before I was even born. Tell me how many Feng Shui masters are really hiding in New York. Li Xiaoxin smiled faintly and whispered, I'm hungry. Can we go get something to eat? And Liang shifted the red dot to another spot, guiding the crane to lower another stone. He patted Li Xiaoxin's hand and said, sure, almost done. We'll grab food right after. This Mingtang pool is the wealth gate of Chase Bank. Nassau Street already sits higher than Wall Street. So this Mingtang doesn't just draw wealth from Wall Street, it even holds water at a higher elevation than the street itself. That's why Chase Bank has stood unshaken for decades. The 5 elements array was designed for steady, reliable gains. Now I'm adding smaller stones nearby to activate stronger windfall luck. Move it a bit more. Left, there. Normally, placing static objects like stones to enhance Feng Shui works very slowly. If you want fast results, you'd light big fire basins in these positions, but the police would fine us if they caught on. So what do I use instead? Basalt. It's volcanic rock. Looks like an ordinary stone, but it's packed with intense fire energy inside. Ancient Feng Shui masters didn't have this knowledge, so I think modern Feng Shui practitioners can only be stronger than they were. From afternoon into evening, Liang and Lu Zhongtang kept their car parked by the East River, watching the 2 towering buildings at the mouth of Wall Street. Sure enough, the area in front of the northern entrance of the Metropolitan Bank Tower had been torn up by a municipal repair crew, a perfect case of digging earth right under Grand Duke Jupiter's nose. While secretly pleased, both men couldn't help glancing anxiously at the 23rd floors of the 2 buildings. Elena's Feng Shui layout enjoyed perfect timing and positioning. Their challenge was to dismantle it without damaging Wall Street's dragon vein or harming innocent people, and neither of them felt confident about pulling it off. At 5 p.m., the rush hour began and office workers poured out of every building. Liang kept his eyes fixed on exit 120, but Elena still hadn't appeared. Meanwhile, Lu Zhongtang, watching the Metropolitan Bank Tower, saw Daniel drive back in broad daylight, swaggering straight into work. This confirmed their suspicion. The cat was about to launch its final assault. With a 12-hour time difference between New York and Singapore, if the financial strike was to hit Singapore's market at 9:30 a.m. local time, it would need to be synchronized with 9:30 p.m. New York time. They had enough manpower and combat strength to kidnap Daniel. Maybe Liang could even convince him directly to refuse the fund manipulation. But Yun had reminded him, it was better to keep Daniel as their known opponent than risk facing someone completely unknown. Though Daniel was ferocious in the markets, he was actually a big-hearted, easygoing guy. If he learned about the cat's conspiracy, he might abandon the fund operation altogether, making Liang lose predictability in this invisible battle. For now, Liang held a slight edge. He knew Daniel's birth chart and could use Feng Shui to direct misfortune straight onto him. Kidnapping Daniel now would only force the cat to replace him with someone potentially far more dangerous. Still, Liang couldn't help wondering if Wall Street was full of talent. Was Daniel really the best fund assassin available? Why did the cat insist on paying such an exorbitant price just for him? And Yun called, there was still no movement in the Johor Strait. They'd enter the ambush zone in 1 hour. Based on Sister Jing's plum blossom divination and the optimal economic attack plan, Liang estimated the cat would trigger the first earthquake just before Singapore's market opened, but they wouldn't destroy Singapore immediately. Unlike the apostles, who sought to build a Third Reich, the cat's goal was economic control. They only needed to manipulate governments and rebuild cities. There was no need for Daniel to crash the market with his fund. But once the first wave of financial shock succeeded and vast wealth flowed into the cat's pockets, Singapore's emptied market would lose all value. That's when a second strike, a truly catastrophic natural disaster, would likely follow. Liang turned to Lu Zhongtang and said, because Singapore is small and densely populated, a major disaster would kill large numbers of government officials. The country would then need a provisional government, just like defeated Iraq, and that new regime would become a Western puppet. International aid organizations would flood in immediately, forcing Singapore to sign numerous unequal treaties. And finally, the U.S. military. There are already several American bases on the island. If those bases were destroyed, terrorists would claim a great victory, and U.S. aircraft carriers would swiftly impose full military control over Singapore and the entire Singapore Strait. It's a win-win for both America and the terrorists. Lu Zhongtang asked in astonishment. This is a state-level conspiracy, a global strategy. And Liang shrugged. Who knows? All we can hope is that it isn't true. At the very least, we must stop this inhuman catastrophe from happening. All right, Xiaoshen and I will head to 120. You stick to the plan and act when the moment comes. After speaking, Liang extended his right hand to Lu Zhongtang and said, Cousin Tang, you saved my life and helped our family countless times. I've never properly thanked you, thank you. Lu Zhongtang grasped Liang's hand firmly, his deep baritone voice ringing with integrity. Hongmen, loyalty and righteousness secure the world. Brothers from all corners are one family. And Liang heard the Phoenix poem and laughed, giving Lu Zhongtang's palm a playful slap. Shit, you just want to get into our family, don't you? Don't look so stiff, I'm just kidding. Call Sister Jing more often. If she stays in that convent much longer, she'll take her final vows and be a nun for life. And Liang got out of the car holding Li Shaoxian's hand. He looked up at the 23rd floor of 120 East River, where every light in the entire floor was on under the shadow of the setting sun, except for the CEO's office, which was dark. American office buildings often kept their lights on all night to create a vibrant cityscape, so the darkness in the CEO's suite clearly meant something was happening inside. The two walked hand in hand like ordinary office workers and took the elevator up to the 23rd floor, the former David Group, now the United Americas Engineering Group. The elevator doors opened directly onto a glass entrance. Inside, the space appeared empty, and Liang rang the doorbell, and a woman in a business suit emerged. After learning he was looking for Elena, she unlocked the door and ushered them in. And Liang and Li Shaoxian stepped into the familiar hallway. Just as they turned the corner, 4 burly men in suits suddenly lunged at them. And Liang still held Li Shaoxian's hand with one hand, while the other remained in his pocket. Before he could react, they pinned him down like a thief. He clung tightly to Li Shaoxian's hand, but the men forcibly pulled them apart and zip-tied each of them separately. Their movements were precise and professional, as if rehearsed, and within seconds, Liang was dragged into the CEO's office while Li Shaoxian, bound with her hands behind her back, was locked in the tea room. Blindfolded and disoriented, Liang was thrown into the CEO's office. Before his eyes could adjust to the darkness, rough hands stripped him naked and dressed him in something resembling a bathrobe. His limbs were then spread wide and strapped to a large table in the shape of a cross. As his vision slowly cleared, he was stunned. This was no longer an office. It had been transformed into something resembling a medieval alchemist's sanctuary. Heavy curtains covered all but the central window, through which the last rays of sunset glowed on the distant horizon. No electric lights were on instead. 4 sets of Jewish menorahs burned along the walls. Behind each stood a large round mirror, multiplying the candlelight into an eerie layered glow. Another massive circular mirror was embedded in the center of the ceiling, from which hung an ornate chandelier. And Liang lay directly beneath it. He strained to look around and saw the 4 men who had captured him exit and locked the door behind them. In the shadows sat 2 men and 2 women, all draped in wide black robes of Jewish priests. One of them was Elena. And Liang shouted at her, "Where's Xiaoxian? Don't hurt her." "I know you're after me. She has nothing to do with this. Let her go first." The table he was strapped to was as large as a single bed. On the floor around it, 6 menorahs were arranged in the pattern of the Jewish Star of David, casting flickering yellow light upward as Elena approached. Her golden hair was coiled neatly, revealing the graceful curve of her neck. The black robe she wore shimmered faintly in the candlelight, translucent enough to reveal the mature, alluring contours of her body beneath. She leaned over the table, bending close until her face was inches from his. "It's you who came after me," she whispered. "Otherwise, how could I have waited for you?" And Liang calmed himself. From the elaborate setup, he knew Elena had planned this meticulously. He'd walked right into her trap. Yet, oddly, he felt a sliver of relief. If she only wanted to control him, there'd be no need for this ritualistic stripping, binding, and staging. Whatever she intended, he was clearly useful to her, and that gave him some leverage. He snapped at her, "Bring Xiaoxian in here. I need to see she's safe. Otherwise, I won't cooperate at all." Elena sighed softly. "Your cooperation is already enough. Xiaoxian can't come in. She'd disrupt our ceremony. In 6 hours, everything will be over. If you cooperate, I'll send you both home safely. I'm not an assassin. I don't kill." With that, she leaned closer and kissed his ear, running her tongue slowly around the rim. And Liang jerked his head away in disgust. "What the hell? Just because you dress up like ghosts doesn't mean you're practicing Kabbalah. Aren't you supposed to be a scientist? You are disgracing the entire scientific community." Leather straps bound his limbs and waist tightly to the table. He couldn't move, not even lift his head to see what he was wearing, but in the large ceiling mirror, he caught his reflection, dressed in the same priestly black robe as Elena. Elena climbed onto the table like a supple Persian cat, kneeling over him. She leaned down, bracing herself on his chest with both hands, and whispered, "Is this the only way we can get close? I told you long ago we share the same genes. After you showed me Chinese metaphysics, I studied it myself. In destiny analysis, compatible birth charts simply mean 2 people are bioelectrically synchronized. No matter how different they seem, they can fall in love. So love knows no boundaries, no bloodline, age, beauty, wealth, or even gender." And Liang stared helplessly into her blue eyes, utterly baffled by her seductive act. "So what do you actually want? Are you seriously expecting us to fall in love right now with those people watching?" Elena's expression instantly hardened. Before he could finish, she slapped him across the face, leaving his cheek burning. Her voice dropped low and sharp. "Those are Kabbalah priests and fellow scientists in my bioengineering research. All 5 of us carry unique genes. Together we can rebuild the tree of life and reshape the world. Our bodies, our blood, they resonate with God's creation." And Liang struggled again, but it was useless. He rolled his eyes and muttered, "Don't be an idiot. God's a good guy. He won't help you hurt people." Elena gently stroked his stinging cheek. "God is the beginning and the end. He is fairness and unfairness, kindness and evil, mercy and cruelty. Through these contradictions, we come to understand him and his world. God is light, so why does darkness exist? Kabbalah teaches that God's light passes through the Sephirot, the divine emanations, and reflects through mirrors: kingship, wisdom, understanding, mercy, severity, beauty, endurance, majesty, foundation, and kingdom. Each mirror dims the light further until it becomes absolute darkness." Ani Lang heard her mention the mirror and immediately recalled the round mirrors arranged around the room. Was this chamber laid out according to the tree of life? Despairingly, he lifted his head and looked back at the only window with its curtains drawn aside. A not yet full moon slowly rose against the lingering glow of sunset. Dusk came especially late in Malaysia. As Anyun and Jing crept toward the coastline, the sun still hung in the sky like a blazing furnace. They stripped off their robes and changed into gray-green military uniforms, quickly reaching the search team's ambush point. And Jing saw the team leader lying motionless on the ground, soaked through, looking like a damp bedsheet tossed carelessly onto the grass. She felt a surge of satisfaction. She had already calculated the exact time for the terrorists' shift change. This fool insisted on applying to bake under the sun for 6 hours straight. Unable to contain herself any longer, she crawled over to him and whispered, "Serve you right." The team leader shot her an angry glare. And Yun whispered, "What's going on?" And Jing turned her gaze forward and said, "Nothing, nothing. Look, someone's coming out." 2 dark-skinned Malays emerged from the bushes, crouching low as they split up, one heading toward the intersection, the other toward the shore. Seizing the moment before they moved farther away, the search team members near the tunnel entrance swiftly approached the hidden opening concealed in the tall grass. And Jing wanted to follow them in, but the team leader grabbed her arm and pinned her down firmly. He'd already planned the infiltration meticulously. Any reckless move from her now would ruin everything. A minute later, the 2 terrorists who'd been lying in wait all day rose from the ground. After glancing around and confirming no movement, they stretched lazily, chatting as they walked back toward the tunnel entrance. At that moment, the team leader and Inyun pressed Jing flat to the earth, watching as the 2 Malays neared the opening, crouched down and signaled to those inside. A cement hatch split open in the ground. Just as the pair began descending, 4 search team members burst from the surrounding grass, tackling them and rolling silently into the tunnel. Simultaneously, the 2 newly posted sentries were also subdued and tightly bound by other team members. In the blink of an eye, the search team executed a flawless series of sentry takedowns. The team leader flashed Anjing a smug grin, then placed a finger to his lips to signal silence before crawling over to inspect one of the captured sentries. The prisoner's limbs were tied behind his back into a tight bundle, his body bent backward into an arch, the so-called pig-binding method, designed to prevent rolling or escape. To the team leader's surprise, aside from a bottle of water, he found nothing else on the man. No gun, no binoculars, no identification. Could someone really stand guard with such minimal gear? And Jing scratched her head in confusion too. The team leader wasn't troubled by how they kept watch. He was worried about Zhang Jiwen's order. They needed to capture live terrorists with weapons as proof of identity to justify launching an international joint operation. Now they'd caught a completely bare suspect. From Malaysia's standpoint of national sovereignty, they'd likely insist this was just an ordinary Malay citizen, not a criminal. After a moment's thought, the team leader crawled through the grass again, soon locating a water pipe emerging from underground. Inside the pipe lay a rope, with a large knot at its end. Clearly, the sentry used this rope to trigger an alarm inside the tunnel. The most primitive method turned out to be the safest in modern times. Had they used any electronic communication, their signals would have been intercepted by special forces half a year ago during Maslama's prison break. Leaving a few men outside to maintain contact, the team leader and the rest quickly entered the tunnel entrance. It was a vertical shaft like a sewer, narrow enough for only one person at a time. At the bottom they found 2 more captives. 10 search team members lined both sides of the passage, ready for orders. The team leader had studied the tunnel construction blueprints. This entrance wasn't marked on them at all, clearly added to mislead attackers. Still, the tunnel itself was originally just a single path. Even if it had been dug deeper recently, it couldn't have become overly complex. Pitch black inside, the team advanced with flashlights winding through the pipes until they reached the main tunnel entrance. It opened into a wide 4-lane sloped corridor, its ceiling sealed shut with concrete. Cold wind swirled through the vast emptiness, making it feel like stepping into a colossal underground tomb. At the bottom of the slope stood a massive iron door. No sound came from within. Armed only with handguns, the search team had no way to breach it. Their infiltration stalled right there. Inside the tunnel, Maslama paced anxiously. The 2 soldiers sent to relieve the sentries hadn't returned in half an hour. Something was clearly wrong above ground. But Matvey, aiming to conserve power and minimize radio emissions, had shut down all generators. Without electricity, they couldn't use electronic surveillance, forced instead to rely solely on human lookouts, just as difficult as fighting in the Afghan mountains. He strode into the nuclear reactor chamber, where only instrument panels and computer screens flickered in the dim light, and said to Matvey, "The soldiers sent to relieve the sentries are missing. We're down 4 men. Turn the power back on immediately and check the monitors to see what's happening up top." Matvey, absorbed in calibrating data for the imminent earthquake activation, had no patience for Maslama's concerns. He'd long resented this fanatical little man, and now, without even knowing what blunder Maslama had committed to lose 4 men, he saw it as further proof of his incompetence. Slowly turning his head, Matvey said, "If the surface is swarming with troops, watching won't help. If it's just a few agents, are you planning to charge out and eliminate them right away? That would only bring the full force of the military down on us immediately." Maslama froze, stunned. He truly hadn't considered these possibilities. Knowing Maslama lacked the strategic mind for such calculations, Matvey continued, "As long as you keep that door shut, nothing happens. After the earthquake is complete, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. But I warn you, don't open that door and let the army in to sabotage my operation." Humiliated by Matvey's sharp rebuke, Maslama's face flushed red. He glared fiercely and retorted, "I also have the detonation switch for this reactor. If the army breaks in, I'll trigger a nuclear explosion first. The resulting radiation leak alone fulfills my objective. I couldn't care less about your earthquake." With that, he turned and stormed out. Matvey stood still for a moment, then bent his head again and resumed his work. Silent stalemate reigned on both sides of the iron door. Though the surface appeared calm, the entire situation hung precariously under Matvey's immense threat. The special forces dared not make a move, each member fearing that if Matvey sensed danger closing in, he might trigger the earthquake at any second. Based on counter-terrorism experience, neither a direct assault nor negotiation stood any chance of success. Zhang Jiwen had been in a tense meeting with his advisors in the conference room. Minute after minute ticked by, yet they still hadn't come up with an effective plan. If they blew open the door and stormed in, Matvey would surely trigger the earthquake immediately. They'd also considered using knockout gas or tear gas, but when the search team checked the ventilation ducts according to the construction blueprints, they found some ducts hadn't even been opened yet, and those that were already operational had been sealed shut with cement. After hours of exhausting efforts that stretched into midnight, everyone was utterly drained, and Yun and Jing returned to their car, waiting anxiously for further orders. When they learned that the special forces couldn't locate any other entry points, and Yun took Jing back up to the top of the tunnel, there had to be ventilation equipment inside. It was just that Matvey, cunning beyond measure, had preemptively sealed off every original vent. And Yun was certain he must have installed a new set of vents somewhere. If they'd had daylight and time to search slowly, they could have found them, but Singapore didn't have another day to spare. And Yun pulled out her Lupin compass and glanced at it. The needle spun wildly, useless now. She then checked her satellite positioning device, but under intense radiation, the screen showed only a blinding white haze. She turned to Jing and said, "Now it's up to you again. Can you calculate where the vents are?" And Jing looked at the Lupin too and sighed. "What's the point of calculating it? The compass can't even show direction anymore, even if I use the hexagrams to fix a bearing. Finding a hole the size of a basin in this pitch-black forest would be nearly impossible. And Yun led Jing to a clearing where trees and shrubs were sparse, the approximate center of the entire construction site. She casually placed the lupin on the ground and said, "Ancient Xingpai Feng Shui masters never used a lupin. When you cast your divination without a compass, don't you orient yourself using your own body as the reference? Now we'll use the markings on this lupin on the ground. Calm your mind and cast the hexagram. You'll get it right." And Jing nodded, closed her eyes, raised both hands toward the sky and whispered a quiet prayer. Then she pulled 6 coins from her pocket, shook them in her palm, and laid them out on the lupin, forming the GE hexagram. She looked up at Yun and asked, "What's the second hand showing?" And Yun understood that Jing was using an extremely precise method of directional divination. On the San Yuan School's Feng Shui lupin, the 64 hexagrams of the Zhou Yi were arranged around the dial, each subdivided into 6 lines, yao, with each yao covering less than 1 degree of azimuth. While standard compasses divide the circle into 360 degrees, the lupin's hexagram-based system divided it into 384 degrees, finer than conventional angular measurement. And Jing's hexagram had already narrowed the target area to within 6 degrees, but by asking for the exact second, she aimed to refine it to within a single degree. And Yun glanced at her wristwatch. 45 seconds. And Jing immediately murmured calculations under her breath. G hexagram, Dui above, Li below, upper 2 plus lower 3 equals 5. Add the second-hand value 9, total 14. Divide by 6, remainder 2. Second yo of G changes. And Yun instantly called over the team leader and pressed the laser sight of her pistol onto the lupin, projecting a red beam from the second yao mark of the G hexagram on the eastern scale. The leader sprinted along the laser line and soon discovered, beneath a thicket of bushes, a vent quietly exhaling a faint breeze. He signaled success by circling his flashlight beam, sending a surge of excitement through Jing and Yun. And Jing quickly cast several more hexagrams, and the search team located 4 additional vents in rapid succession. And Yun immediately phoned Zhang Jiwen to report the vents had been found, but she strongly opposed using knockout or tear gas. She argued that knockout gas wouldn't incapacitate people instantly. If the enemy sensed an attack, they'd trigger the earthquake without hesitation. Tear gas posed the same risk. It would only alert them faster. Instead, she instructed Zhang Jiwen to dispatch a marine fireboat. Marine fireboats were primarily used for offshore firefighting, equipped with powerful pumps capable of drawing seawater and projecting 6 high-pressure water jets over 200 meters. But Yun wasn't aiming the jets across the strait toward Malaysia. The fireboat anchored in a bay hidden from Malaysian border patrols, and divers swam across the strait, delivering 6 large hoses to the search team. The team connected the hoses to the vents and tunnel entrances. At the command, torrents of seawater surged through the underground passages. The search team, reinforced by incoming agents, split into 2 squads. One surrounded the surface area to intercept any terrorist breakout, while the other infiltrated the tunnels for direct suppression. And Jing, eager to join the fight, was yanked back into the car by Yun, whose very purpose in coming along was to keep her sister out of combat. And Jing sulked, protesting, "Sister Yun, if you make me sit here doing nothing, why did we even come? I've been in battles before, I can help. You've already helped immensely. This whole operation is your doing," and Yun replied firmly. "But you're not a soldier, you don't have a combat role. Sure, you're a sharpshooter, but you've had no military training and can't coordinate with the team leader. Going in would put everyone at greater risk." And Jing sat stiffly, refusing to speak, pulling out 2 automatic pistols and gripping them tightly. Her eyes tracked the search team as they swiftly moved into position and descended into the tunnels. Her lips moved incessantly, chewing on scripture like a squirrel gnawing nuts. Do not remain silent when others need rescue. Do not hide your wisdom. Do not stretch out your hand only to receive, and withdraw it when giving. Do not yield before fools, nor show undue deference to the powerful. Fight for truth unto death, the Lord will fight for you. And Yun recognized this as her daughter's classic tantrum routine, equal parts exasperating and endearing. She wrapped an arm around Jing's shoulders and coaxed gently. All right, don't be mad. You're not avoiding helping others. You're protecting your mother. I'm getting older. All I can do is support them from here. And you're my protector. Otherwise, the captain would have to waste manpower watching over me, right? Hearing this, and Jing realized it made sense. Protecting her mom was important too. A reluctant smile broke across her face, and Yun's strategy struck directly at Matvei's fatal weakness. Inside the workshop, he feared nothing except water. His facility was packed with electrical equipment, and moisture was its Achilles heel, fully focused on awaiting the first test tremor at dawn. Matvei never expected the lights to suddenly short-circuit. Moments later, the main control circuits failed, leaving only emergency power running. As he prepared to send someone to inspect the wiring, multiple water jets burst through the exhaust vents. Caught off guard, Matvei was drenched head to toe. Within seconds, the workshop resembled a shipwreck, flooding from floor to ceiling, chaos erupting as everyone scrambled in panic. The newly installed exhaust vent was concealed and seawater-proof. Such a massive influx of water could only mean a deliberate attack. Matvei no longer cared about anything else. He immediately flipped all the switches, activating the particle resonance machine. The entire tunnel began to vibrate faintly, like a car just starting its engine. Maslama had been standing guard behind the large iron door. When the seawater rushed in, he realized the assault had begun. Ever since his falling out with Matvei had sealed the workshop door shut, and no one had come to consult him about their next move. But But that didn't matter to him. His sole mission was to trigger a nuclear explosion right here. Maslama gathered the other fighters for prayer. After the intricate ritual, the seawater had already risen to their knees. 20 warriors, each carrying a Uzi submachine gun and holding a lantern, formed a circle around him. Maslama raised the Quran in one hand and gripped the remote detonator for the nuclear reactor in the other, his voice ringing with fervor. An ancient warrior who resisted the Roman emperor once declared before his death, "Do not assume that because you desire to conquer the world, everyone else desires to be conquered by you." The modern Roman Empire, today's Western powers, imposes its values globally, claiming arrogantly to represent universal human civilization. Centuries of repeated invasions and victories have made them overconfident and haughty. They believe all humanity must imitate the West, that only one political, economic, and cultural model is permissible on Earth, and that all other civilizations must be eradicated. This is how they treat Islam and Muslims. They see themselves as conquerors. Maslama scanned the faces of his men, eyes blazing. Every warrior wore an expression of righteous fury. He continued, his voice heavy with conviction. Islam has shone brilliantly for over 1,000 years. It is one of humanity's greatest civilizations. We will not bow to barbaric colonial rule, simply because we suffer defeat today. Westerners are spiritually impoverished and culturally shallow. They lack the stable spiritual wealth of Islam and the moral character of Muslims. Their dream of reshaping Muslims through brute force and hegemony is pure fantasy. Islam cannot be erased. Muslims cannot be conquered. His words ignited a chorus of furious roars from the fighters. Maslama raised his voice once more. This is the beginning of jihad and its end. O Allah, raise the banner of Islam. Amid the surging fervor, Maslama roared and slammed his thumb down on the detonator. The warriors shouted even more wildly, but nothing happened. After a moment, they realized something was wrong. They watched as Maslama frantically pressed every button on the remote, yet no one ascended to paradise. Only then did Maslama understand he'd fallen for Matvey's trick. Under threat of detonation, Matvey must have remotely disabled the reactor's triggering mechanism from inside. The seawater now reached Maslama's thighs. Biting his lip in rage, he waded toward the workshop door and pounded it with his rifle butt. No response came from within, only the growing roar of engines, as if hundreds of cars were revving simultaneously. He spun around, yanked open the safety on his Uzi, and shouted to his men, "Allah commands us to defeat our enemies with our guns. Open the front gate, that is the doorway to paradise. Charge!" The iron door swung open. Instantly gunfire erupted from both sides of the narrow gap. The fanatical militants charged out recklessly, spraying bullets in all directions. They clashed with the search team and were pinned down on the steep slope near the tunnel exit. Seeing breakout through the passage was impossible. Maslama ordered his men to blow open the concrete slab above the tunnel roof. A series of explosions tore through the air, and the cement ceiling collapsed as if the sky itself were splitting apart, letting in the pale light of early dawn. At the same moment, the particle resonance machine completed its startup sequence. 3 enormous hinged wheels rotated deep within the seabed strata, emitting powerful low-frequency vibrations. Precisely directed 3 UK microwaves pierced along the dragon vein toward the seabed beneath the Singapore Strait. The earth trembled violently. The sun had not yet risen, but the sky was already turning blue. And Yun sat in a car parked at a distance, her eyes fixed on the tunnel entrance. All around, the night remained eerily still, until suddenly a string of underground explosions ripped through the ground. Dense gunfire erupted from within the tunnel, and her car jolted sharply up and down, swaying left and right. The world before her blurred as if a television screen had glitched, and in her ears echoed a piercing ghostly howl of wind from nowhere.